Good morning, everyone. If you could please take your seats, we're going to get this early morning party started. Welcome, everyone. I know everyone's excited about the program this morning. I'm Eliza Harris-Giuliano. I'm the current chair of the CNU's Board of Directors. We work closely with the CEO, Lynn Richards, to help set the strategic vision for the organization to get great places built faster. For many new urbanists who've been around this movement for a long time, Savannah is a coming home. We are coming home both to one of the oldest and probably the most elegant plan in the United States. It's also just up the road from Savannah's sister city, Charleston, where the charter was signed nearly 20 years ago. And most importantly, Charleston up the road is my hometown, so it's a coming home for me too. We're also excited, in addition to being excited to coming home and seeing friends that we get to see every year or every few years, we're excited to see all the new faces. Many of you probably figured out by now that the blue dots mean people who are attending CNU to the first time, and I'm thrilled to see so many blue dots today. Now, it's also important to know that those blue dots don't necessarily mean people are new to the new urbanism. While some people are, they may be experts in their respective fields, whether it's financing or public engagement or any number of other disciplines that are critical to making our movement stronger. But there are also people like Jason's probably in the room somewhere from my adopted home in Orlando who's been faithfully who's been faithfully implementing the new urbanism in city government for over a decade. So he is a dyed-in-the-wool new urbanist, and this is his first Congress. So please, yes, the blue dots are there so that you can be nice to newcomers. But that's an important part of growing our movement. And also, they're absolutely people that you may be able to learn from as well. So it's important to understand that because of people like Jason, we are much bigger than the people in this room, even than our membership roles, because there are people all over the country who've been influenced by the charter and who are faithfully implementing that in their neighborhoods and hometowns. So this room is just a small segment of this movement that's moving the charter forward. Some of those people, thankfully to live streaming this year, are able to participate via the internet. We're much bigger even than the record-breaking attendance that Lynn will talk about in just a minute. So look around this room. I mean, really, how often is it that you're surrounded by 1,000 people who are here because they want to make their neighborhood, this world, a better place? That's kind of a miracle. And getting to know those people is important, not just to you, but to the new urbanism as a whole, because this movement, from its founding, was built not just on expertise, but on friendships. Friendships strong enough that we could tear each other's plans apart and still have beers afterwards. It's built on late-night conversations and plans drawn on cocktail napkins. So get to know the person next to you, because they might be the perfect sounding board. They might be the collaborator that you need for the next great idea, or they might just be one step ahead of you on the journey that you're on to make your city better. I ran for one of the elected seats on the board 6 years ago because I believed that the Congress is built on the ideas generated by this vibrant membership that we see a small piece of here at the Congress. And the organization's ability to platform those ideas, whether they be from founders or board members or next generation, has continued to expand. We've got we don't know whether the next idea will come from any given group, whether it's suburban retrofit, missing middle, tactical urbanism. These ideas have come from all quarters of our organization. For over the last 4 years, Lynn has been working to expand the capacity of our organization to platform ideas and to get good work done. She's been working tirelessly to increase our financial position so we can get more of the good accomplished. And she's been working faithfully since 2016 to implement the strategic plan that we put together in collaboration with the board in that year. But now we are looking forward for the next 3 years and far beyond to see what the next great hill is that we need to climb. And we know that you're an important part of that. So thank you all, and Lynn is now going to give her annual President's Report, which is one of her innovations in bringing you into that conversation.
Hi, everyone. So I'm sure many of you can probably guess the single most asked question that I have had during this entire Congress, which is how many? What's the number? And I was like, I'm not telling you the number until Friday morning. So I have the number. It is record-breaking. I'm sorry, Buff Chase. I'm sorry, Preston, Russ Preston. I'm sorry, all of you amazing local host committee from the 2007 Providence, Rhode Island Congress, because you now are in second place. So I'm going to ask you all to take a little guess. So Providence was 1520 attendance. So I already told you that we exceeded 1520. How many of you think that we exceeded it by just a little bit? No? Okay. And the number, as of about 20 minutes ago, and the registration desk people tell me that people are still coming. So this is not the final number, but the number right now, 1605. Which makes this the highest attended Congress in the history of our organization. Congratulations to all of you. So for the last 4 years, I've been coming up here and talking to you about the state of the organization. And I tell you what we've done and where we're going, et cetera, and I almost didn't do it this year because, frankly, I'm guessing that you all are getting a little tired of me saying we're in the strongest financial position of the last decade. Our membership is up 25% just over last year. We now have over 1 million readers on cnu.org, and that, too, is growing exponentially every year. I think our outreach numbers are up in the thousands of percent. We just stopped counting. And then this is now our highest attended Congress. But I want to talk to you about impact because our numbers are up. And what does that tell you? That just tells you kind of how we're reaching people. It's not telling you what we do. In 1993, CNU was founded to eliminate the barriers of urbanism. It was a clear call of what we needed to do. And in many ways, that journey is like a mountain. And so I want to take this metaphor and move it. It was clear, this is a summit. And there are a lot of different paths to that summit. And what did we do? We bounded together, we worked together, we created the tools and the equipment. We didn't know how we were going to achieve that, but we did it together. And in many ways, if you look back on these last 25 years, you'll see that we accomplished a great number of goals. And Rob Studeville's 25 Great Ideas is a great example of that. But more importantly, right, we created a wave of amplification. Organizations copied what we do. We copy what CNU did. We fundamentally changed the culture of community design and development, and we fundamentally changed the conversation. There are still battles that we need to fight. We have not at all eliminated all of the barriers to urbanism. So let's not get to that peak and to say, whew, we're there, because we're not there yet. But I'll say, since 2008, I think we have reached a plateau. And I think in large part that was because of the recession. And I'm not telling you anything that you don't know. I have been hearing this for the last several years, that we've kind of reached a plateau. And you all intuitively recognize this. I think that sense that we need to go further, we need to be bold, is exactly what generated the energy around Next Gen, around lean urbanism, around the incremental development. We have a number of breakout efforts, and we're all still feel like we're circling on the plateau. And I think now we're ready. We are re-provisioned, re-energized. We have the base. We have the strategic alliances. And now is the time for us to be bold. What is next? This process, this evolution of us naming and determining the next big goal, let me tell you, this is a normal part of a mission-driven organization like ourselves. In 1938, the March of Dimes was founded to eradicate polio. When polio was eradicated, did they fold up shop? No, they evolved to protect maternal and infant health. The Audubon Society was founded over 100 years ago to protect birds through fighting the plume trade. When they accomplished that goal, they created several iterations of new missions, always with the goal of protecting birds, but through different strategies, and now they're focused on climate change. Teach for America was founded over 20 years ago to place teachers in underperforming schools. They are now the voice for education reform. CNU was founded in 1993 to eliminate the barriers to urbanism. What's next for us? What's the next big goal? Is our goal to create an adaptive America, a walkable world, a nation of neighborhoods? I don't know. I don't know what the goal is, but I know one thing. It's going to be the CNU Charter, fully realized. And identifying this goal and the paths to that is not something that the CEO can do, nor should it be. It is not something that the board can do. It is not something, with all due respect, that the founders can do. It is only something that we can do together. It has to be a collaborative think. It has to be a collaborative, big think, big movement together for us to identify what is next for us. See, here we go, different paths up the bit. As new urbanists, we are grounded in reality. We've always relied on the practical insights of our members to identify the points of maximum leverage. And I'm calling on you now, right now, to share that expertise again. What do you think this summit is? I gave you a couple of ideas that I have. Where do you think the points of maximum leverage are? We want a force multiplier. We don't have time anymore with climate pressures, with the stratification between economics, with sprawl continuing. We are out of time. We need a big vision, and we need strategies and approaches that will be force multipliers. What are those? We're not trying to get up the mountain alone. We can all climb together. When we started in 1993, we didn't have the tools, we didn't have the equipment, but we worked together across all disciplines to define, implement, and amplify new urbanism. We need that same courage and collaboration now. Are you ready? Are you going to join me? So join me now. Tweet your ideas to #CNUFuture. And for those of you who don't tweet, raise your hands. Who tweets? Okay, those of you who don't tweet, Stephanos, I see you're not right. Keep your hands up. Keep your hands up. Stephanos, you don't tweet. I want you to look around and find somebody who tweets, and you're going to help those who don't tweet. Because by next week, I want to receive not 100, not 200, not 1605. I want to receive thousands of tweets on what is our big vision and where are the maximum points of leverage. We can do this. I know we can do this. And you know why? Because of you, right? CNU members have always been our strength. They're the strength of the movement and of the organization. And I constantly quote Stephanos. You're in the front row, sorry. I constantly quote Stephanos because he says we are a swarm. So, lead the way. We're listening. Thank you very much.
So one of the most exciting things over the past 6 years that I've been able to do is be part of the team that hired Lynn, and she is just a dynamo. Those numerical changes that you see are 90% Lynn's work and direction. So with the support and direction, with the support of her staff. So I just want to thank Lynn again. And while we're talking about the future, let's talk about the next Congress. I'd like to invite the CNU Louisville team up, led by David and Barry, the co-chairs, and they will tell you a little bit about what to expect next year. We hope to see all of you there.
Savannah, you've done a fantastic job. You really have. And there's more to come. I know that. But for just a moment, if we could think about next year. Now, I'd like you to practice something with me right now. Say Louisville. Louisville. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. That'll qualify you for a special gift as you're leaving the auditorium. Keep practicing, though, and we'll look forward to seeing you next year. Barry?
Thank you, David. So I've been in Louisville for 2 decades, but I still can't get my Bronx accent about how I say Louisville. Still working at it. Anyway, we're thrilled to death that CNU is coming to Louisville next year. Savannah has certainly set a high bar, and we're already working really hard, including the large contingent we've brought down here, to meet that bar and maybe, hopefully, exceed it. Louisville, there's a lot of really interesting things going on in Louisville to show you, but we've got a lot of work still to do. We really are a work in progress. And our goal, really, for CNU 27 is to have a truly collaborative process with all of the attendees and all of the speakers where we roll up our sleeves and together help move Louisville forward. And with that segue, let me now introduce Mary Ellen Wiederwall, who is the head of Louisville Forward.
Thank you, Barry. Good morning. It's a pleasure to stand here this morning and on behalf of this esteemed group, welcome you to Louisville in 2019. I'm Mary Ellen Wiederwall. I'm the chief of Louisville Forward, which is the City of Louisville's agency dedicated to economic and community development. It is my absolute pleasure on behalf of Louisville Mayor Greg Fisher to welcome you and hope that you will join us for CNU 27. Louisville is a mid-sized city in middle America, in the middle of it all, and a city on the rise. Since 2014, we've experienced over $13 billion of new capital investment announced, underway, or completed. We're a city where tradition and modernity stand side by side as we celebrate our 240th birthday this year, and we continue to reshape our skyline. With our largest in the nation collection of Victorian mansions, shotgun houses, and second largest group of iron facades in the nation, you'll have much to see. With our Olmsted Park system, our recently completed 4,000 acres of parklands at Floyd's Fork, Louisville Loop, and the nation's largest municipal forest, you'll have much to experience. And you know, you can't spell Louisville, no matter how you say it, without the word love. And that is one of many reasons why Louisville is the international charter city of compassion. Louisville is a city born on the river and a culture at the confluence of Midwestern sensibilities and Southern hospitality. And if our built environment isn't enough to woo you to Louisville, we've got bourbon. Just in case. Yeah, that's a round of applause for bourbon. It's America's only native spirit, and we'll have some for you. And so from new urbanism to new bourbonism, thank you, David Toms. Let's check out a taste of Louisville.
If I could describe this town in a word, and that word can't be Louisville.
It's the place to come for CNU 27.
Most people are very surprised when they come to Louisville. They have no idea that we're this big, that we have this much going on.
I didn't know a thing about Louisville. I thought rolling hills and horses. right?
We have gone from being one of the most important historic cities in the Midwest to being a city that got a little bit forgotten over the last 30 years, and now it is time for Louisville to come back and blossom. The great thing about Louisville is that there was no real development in the 70s and 80s. We have all these great 150, 100-year-old buildings that we can now rehabilitate, renovate.
We're a city of beautiful architecture. If you go down to the Main Street area, you see much of that preserved.
Louisville has a little bit of everything. We have dense urban areas, we have historic urban areas that need to be rehabilitated and reclaimed.
I think part of the whole educational process of bringing the team we brought in to do Norton Commons started to influence urbanism in the city and in other places. We were a city that was largely influenced by the Olmsted Parks and Parkway system and the Olmsted neighborhoods around those parks.
The park system is beautiful. And of course, green space is so important to every community.
Culturally, you're sitting in a world-class city that's punching at the same levels as cities 10 times its size.
And of course, bourbonism. The act of visiting Louisville to enjoy bourbon and our local food with all these top quality, world-class bourbon experiences along Main Street as well. Nothing like it anywhere else in the world.
The cool thing about bourbon is it is America's native spirit. So it is authentic, and it is Louisville, and it is Kentucky.
Out on the river, on the bell of Louisville.
If you've seen the success of the Napa Trail, like you can actually walk the urban bourbon trail.
You have to come here and eat your way through Louisville because you'll be blown away.
You got the flavor of a big city, you got the food of a big city, but the key component to Louisville is the people are so gracious.
You know, Louisvillians love Louisville more than any other city I've ever been in.
I'm never leaving Louisville. We never intended to stay, and I'm never going to go. It'll take a crowbar to get me out of here.
I'm really thrilled to be in Louisville at this time and to be a part of the Renaissance. It's an exciting time.
And I use that parallel of Chicago at being at 2 million people when they did the Burnham Plan. Louisville's going through a similar transition in that we're reclaiming the riverfront for public use.
The historic Portland neighborhood has been disinvested in for the last 80 years, but there is an amazing urban fabric still in place.
I really believe Louisville is going through what I would call a renaissance in that we are rediscovering, in many ways, our roots. We're not there yet. I think we have more to do. And so part of CNU coming here, I think, can help us to focus on further extension of what we've been doing and maybe even look at how we can do it better.
So it has a little bit of everything, but it needs a lot of love and a lot of 21st century ideas. So we're very excited to bring Congress for New Urbanism to Louisville. It's got all this potential, and I think people are now just starting to see it.
We need CNU's expertise and their ideas around placemaking. That's extremely important. Getting those block by block areas that are non-performing right now, getting them back on the grid in a meaningful way and become a part of the placemaking that people from all over the city want to come and have that experience.
So just like it takes a long time for bourbon to mature in a cask, it's taken a long time for Louisville to come to its rightful place as a player on the international stage. And we also think Louisville is a great laboratory for urban experiments because we have this great urban fabric, and it's the 21st century. It's time to kind of rethink the American city, and Louisville is the place to do it.
It's the place where new urbanism meets new bourbonism.
First time I saw you was out on the river, out on the river on the bell of Louisville.
So I hope you're feeling the Louisville love this morning. And want to make sure that you stick it out to the end of our session this morning, not only because the speaker is awesome, but because we have a little bit more to whet your appetite here at the end. So on your way out, be sure to get that little taste of Louisville. Consider it a bourbon aperitif before your lunch. Cheers, and welcome to Louisville in 2019.
Thank you, Louisville, a city which fits swimmingly into this session's theme, livable cities of the 21st century. I'm Doug Kelbaugh. This is my 24th CNU. I know Stephanie Bothwell has been to every one of them. Is there anyone else that's been to all 26 CNUs out there? Who's that? Peter Katz. Anybody else? Two of you, great. What's that? Where's Andres? Oh, okay, 3, all right. Yeah, proof, we want proof. Jan Gehl is the founding partner of Gehl Architects and Professor Emeritus of Urban Design at the Royal Danish Academy of Fine Arts in Copenhagen, a wonderful institution that I had the privilege of teaching at for a couple of months. It's at the end of the famous Strøget walking street in the King's Palace, which I think is the first walking street of the modern era, started in 1962. His research on public spaces and public life was first documented in his classic book, so beautifully named, Life Between Buildings, back in '71. That's almost half a century ago. Since then, he's written 6 books, all of which he'll be signing starting at 1:30 in the DeSoto Hotel bookstore, and he'll stay as long as he has to. He said he'll be there till midnight if necessary. Seriously. His research on how to design public space for human use has been applied to cities across the globe: Europe, North America, Australia, Japan, Singapore, and even Saudi Arabia. He's been awarded the Abercrombie Prize for exemplary contributions to town planning, honorary degrees from University of Edinburgh, Halifax, Toronto, an honorary fellowship from the RIBA, the Royal Institute of British Architects, the AIA, DOT's Transportation Commissioner's Award for the exceptional contribution he made to the New York City streetscape and public realm plan, and I can safely predict that he'll win at least one more award. This is the second time CNU has been honored with a plenary talk by Jan. Let us give him a grand welcome.
First of all, my great thanks to CNU for inviting me. They've done that several times. I've not been able to come. But then, of course, with the devoted President Lin, she came on her knees all the way to Copenhagen and dragged me over here. So here I am. Before I start, I should mention I'll need some water at some point. Somebody will fetch that. Oh, yeah, fine. Sorry for the interruption. Okay, the subject today, I have the monitor over here. The subject for today is livable city for the 21st century, and my point is that it's absolutely necessary to put the people first in the planning to achieve such goal. We could call it that, but I had also thought about we could call this travel I'm going to make with you from Jane Jacobs to livable cities. It's a journey of 50 years, and we will start right now. There has been in the second half of the 20th century 2 major planning paradigms who have been totally dominating and have really screwed up the mindsets and the mind of politicians, of planners, of architects, of everybody, citizens, whatever. But first, there's something interesting about this modernism. That is, before the modernism, cities all over the world in the good old days, they looked like this, whether we were in Canada or in Japan or in Sweden or in Italy. So they were all built to this model, Homo sapiens, the slow, linear, horizontal, 5 kilometer an hour walking animal with an enormous appetite for other people, knowledge about other people. They were all built for that, and they were all very successful in this. They were built by people for people. Then came the modernists. I'll make a long story short. Of course, it started in the 20s, it developed in the 30s. There was a big break during the war where nothing much was happening in this area. It was a very strong ideology. They did away with everything which was done until that. They say all the old places are redundant, and Corbusier, that he made this drawing here, this sketch here, saying that cities are bad, streets are bad, squares are bad. What is good is freestanding buildings and grass. Get cracking. And also put all the functions in different places, and that was the sign. One of the important things they did was to declare that we had a new animal living in the cities. That was the modern man. He was rushing from one place to another, and he, of course, could not use that old fabric at all. He would be rushing. So they defined a new person, and because this definition, they did away with all they knew about how to make good cities. There was a lot of experience. There was a lot of traditions being handed from one generation to the other into these cities, but that was all thrown out. Now everything had a new beginning. Until this point, all the cities and all the habitation of Homo sapiens was made around spaces where we did our things, we did our communication, we did our markets, we met our fellow citizens, everything in spaces. They were streets, they were squares, they were parks, they were spaces. And the buildings came up to the spaces and formed the spaces. With the modernists, all this was gone. And suddenly, it was not the spaces which was the focus, it was the objects and the traffic. In the old cities, they were built around spaces. The new cities were objects with leftover space which nobody knew how to use. They were very drastic, and they thought we should take all the cities down to save the world. This is Corbusier's plan for Paris, to save Paris, erase it, and build 24 high-rise buildings where the Parisians can look out and see all of Paris in one view. That was not really done, luckily. 1960, I take that as a sort of parting point, because that was where these new paradigms were really rolled on in a very big scale. And also the cities expanded, and to sort of overview the whole thing, the planners went up in aeroplanes and started to organize the cities on models from above. The site planners were hanging around at rooftop height in helicopters, but down between the buildings, nobody was asked to look after the people scale. Nobody was asked to look after where people were. Everybody was up there hanging in the planes. There is a story that is well known that Corbusier loved to fly, and he loved to see how beautiful the cities could be from the aeroplane. But what about eye level? I call this kind of planning the Brasilia syndrome. I'm sorry, there are some people from Brasilia here today, but please forgive. Brasilia is fantastic. 1955, international competition, fantastic, hula-boo. And that was sort of the model city of modern planning, and it is a wonderful city. It looks wonderful from the air. It's an eagle, and top of the eagle, head of the eagle is the parliament, and the wings are where people work and live. And the government buildings, you see them, especially at rooftop perspective, they have lawns, enormous lawns, and they have Niemeyer's beautiful government buildings, it's all fantastic. But from eye level, Brasilia is shit. They never realized that there would be Brazilians moving around there. They never realized that they will have to walk from one end to the other. They will have to cross all these lawns, and they never had money to give all of them helicopters so they could enjoy their city. That is, to me, the Brasilia syndrome. From the airplane, everything is fine. Down at eye level, much to be wanted. So, to me, modernism was the end of concern for people. That was not the issue no more. And we left all these spaces where people could have a jolly good time, which they did not have. Also, modernism was the end of the knowledge of human scale, and it was beginning of an enormous confusion about what would be a good scale. We could build from an airplane, we could build enormous buildings, enormous high buildings, enormous wide streets, many leftover spaces, and the whole notion of human scale and where people would like to be was diffused, and the whole profession of planners and architects got extremely confused, and to a long extent they still are. Modernism. The other paradigm which have been dominating the last 50 years has been the car invasion. Again, I put to 1960 there as a key time, because that was when the cars really started to roll into our society and take over our habitats. I have a little series here, car invasion in 3 stages. First stage, very nice. Main Street, Copenhagen, Main Square, Copenhagen. Everybody is going about their business. The city belongs to people. One car has arrived, no problem. A little bit later, there were more cars, and it started to be everybody save themselves as best they can. And then the third phase is when cars have taken over everything, and this is a pedestrian crossing in Moscow, combined crossing, parking space, and slalom training. Also, with the cars came another enormous confusion to the sense of scale and knowledge of scale, because suddenly everything had to be made for 60 kilometers an hour speeds, and we have now the 16 kilometer an hour scale, which is actually in all our suburbs, they are 60 kilometer an hour scale. In all the old cities, we had 5 kilometer scale, which had much more to say to human beings and to our senses, and it was a completely different story from the 60 kilometer scale. But confusion, scale, sense of scale, completely lost and forgotten. I started with the year 1960 as an important year in this, where really the expansion of cities started in a big way, and all these new ideas rolled out. And one may ask, what was known about the quality of people in cities at that time? And because they've thrown out everything the previous generations knew, we knew nothing. So virtually nothing was known, and it has to start from square one. So, yeah, here we are. Of course, you know that one of the very first voices to stand up against this development was Jan Gehl, based on her experiences in New York. And she wrote in her book, her famous book, 1961, if the modernists and the motorists are to form our cities, they will be dead cities and not great cities. And of course, it's interesting to see how famous she still is, how much she's still used and adhered to. She really came with a message, very strong message, just after this thing really exploded. I'll go on and tell you very shortly about the story of my own life. I graduated as an architect of all years, 1960. I was trained in the 50s in School of Architecture. And what did we train in the 50s in School of Art? We trained modernism. We had a lot of blocks, and we were standing over the model and moving the blocks around from 5 kilometers up. And then suddenly we said, oh, this is a good composition, so it must be a good city. Wow, we made a good city here. Also, we went 3 times a day towards Brasilia. That was the great thing in our lives. And we had this fantastic education. One of our teachers was Professor Lindström. He was a Swedish guy, and he explained that a great housing area is something which looks great from the freeway. And he really was really successful with this housing area in Stockholm, which may look very nice from the freeway, but for sure didn't look nice from any other directions or speeds. Myself, I rushed out of School of Architecture with all this fine education to realize this and to do all these wonderful things for people I learned. And then I married a psychologist. And there came some moments in the house in the coming years. All the young architects and the young psychologists, they met there, and constantly the psychologists would say, why are you architects not interested in people? Why don't they teach you anything about people in School of Architecture? Why does your professors go out 4 o'clock in the morning and take photos of the monuments so there'll be no disturbing people in the lectures in front of the buildings? Have you thought about that? We had not. And I personally felt especially guilty because I was closest to the lady. And we realized that between architecture and planning and social sciences, there was an enormous gap. They didn't know nothing about what we were doing, and we didn't know what they were doing. And it was evident that whatever we built was manipulating with the happiness and the opportunities of Homo sapiens. Nothing was known. In my own case, I had to go back to School of Architecture for 40 more years to start to find out what they didn't tell me in the first place. And what I was really occupied with was trying to make the people who use our architecture, who use our city, make them visible. So we came to know how it was used and how we manipulate it so we could do a better job. And I'll just show you some little examples of some. Yeah, maybe I should say, how did I do it? Mostly I sat on my behind for 40 years and watched. And watched what people were doing, where they liked to be, what they liked to do, what types of activities they were doing, the difference between age groups and winter and summer, everything. So I was sitting there for 40 years and giving you a few examples. This is School of Architecture in Copenhagen, moved to a new place, an old army barrack, and a famous landscape architect came in and made some nice lawns with an iron edge as lawns shall be made today. So he made this here. But there was a little problem, because in the foreground here is a corner, and in the background here is a canteen where the students can have coffee. And the moment the students came around the corner and saw the coffee place, of course they went for the coffee, because it's only in the fantasy of landscape architects that students will walk in. Mankind is he's very careful with his energy. And when he can save some energy, he does it. So when there's coffee, you go for the coffee. 3 weeks later, the landscape architect had to come out and correct his design. He could have known from day one if he had known the least about Homo sapiens. We have another little story here. There's something called the edge effect, which has to do with if we are to stay for a while in a place, We hate to stay out in the middle of nowhere. We drift over to the edge where we can stand with our back covered and we can see the whole space in front of us. It's a very strong pattern all over the world, the edge effect. So people go to the edge when they are to wait for a while. If you're standing in the middle, people will start to say, what's he doing there? And he may be weird, or stay away from him, we say to the children. But over at the edge, it's just fine. It could be in St. Peter's Square or in Barcelona, all over this. Then we started to realize maybe architects are not that like other people. Maybe they have other rules of placing themselves in a room. So we made a very thorough studies of architecture students in several countries, in Sweden, in Denmark, in England, Scotland, and we found that architecture students are just like other people. They love to sit out by the edge if they are to have a good time for a while. So then we started to wonder who put up these. And I can guarantee you that there will be no one sitting there unless they're desperately tired. And if you do this kind of thing, I will advise you to bring in some bronze people. or they'll never be used. And here's from Toronto. Daniel Libeskind didn't have any bronze people, so it didn't work there. But what was he doing there anyway on the sidewalk? Then there's all this question that in various parts of the world people are very different. In my opinion, and throughout all my research, I think people are very much Homo sapiens, and we have the same rules of behavior from Greenland to New Zealand, from Japan to Southern Africa. We have the same biological history, the same senses, the same way we move. We are all the little walking animal doing 5 kilometers an hour. And when we sit in Washington and when we sit in Moscow, it's completely the same. Interesting. Over the years, I started to systematize all these in observations, and a little book was produced, Life Between Buildings. And much to my surprise, it's 50 years now since, but it was my PhD. It started to come out in other countries, and I was very happy to see it coming out in developing countries, because they thought really they could need some of this care for people in making better future for their hard-pressed cities. Then another period elapsed, and I left university. I was thrown out. I was too old. That was 12 years ago. But then the foundation, who has been very generous towards these studies, they came all the time up to university and say, hey, Jan, we like what you are doing. Tell me, do you actually have enough money? Would you need some more millions? Do you need more PhD students? Would you need some visiting professors and study tours? You can have it here. They were very generous, fantastic foundation. And I thought when I had left the school, that was the end of it. But then they came again a couple of years later, while I was advising cities in one corner of the world and the other. They said, oh, Jan, we would like you to sit down and write down everything you know now, while you can still remember it. So I said, I haven't got time because I'm working there. They say, isn't that a matter of how many assistants we can offer you? And suddenly I had time, and it came out. And much to my joy, I've seen it in very short years being spread. I was very proud being in the Arab countries very recently. They've taken one picture of a bathing tube out, but apart from that, it's intact. And I'm even more proud and what's called, it's moving for me to realize that this book is now out in 37, now it's 39, because Vietnam has just signed up in 8 years. It is not necessarily, or it's not because it's a fantastic book in any way, but there has been so little made about people in cities, and there is such a great hunger worldwide for this information. That's how I interpret it also when I go around and meet these various places. So, in conclusion, we didn't know much about 1960. But now, in 2018, we know quite a bit more. There has been quite a bit written from the days of Jane Jacobs to some of my works down in the corner. And many of the books actually are made in America, where there's been a big production of research. I think that there are more examples of good work in other parts of the world where it's easier to maneuver. I was in Berkeley at one time. They made excellent research, much better than we did in Denmark. But in Denmark, we were able to have everybody follow and use the research. In Berkeley, they mostly wrote the books and went on to something else because the society was too big. So we had an advantage of coming from a small, closely knitted society in Denmark or in Scandinavia. I saw that difference. Anyway, what did we find out in all this research? And that will be just very fleeting. There were a lot of things about city planning which stood in the way of people using their public spaces and meeting their fellow citizens. And actually we found that nearly all the principles of the modernists were exactly the opposite of what you should do. But the major influence on people's behavior, the really important thing, that was the details. And of course, I'll take here one of the most famous public spaces in the world, the Campo in Siena. It's been there for 700 years, it's still working fantastically, and we could say, is this a miracle, or could it be that they knew what they were doing? Over the years, we made a list of keywords for making nice places at eye level. And there's a level up there about that you should be protected from the evils you don't like in the city. Then it should be comfortable. It should be nice to walk and sit and stand and talk and whatever. And then there are the enjoyment, good human scale, ability to enjoy the good parts of the climate, and finally, aesthetic quality, positive sense experiences. But this aesthetics in the corner is deliberately number 12, because if the other 11 is not there, then it's not enough to make things beautiful. We were always told that in School of Architecture, just make good aesthetics and people will come. No, they will not. You have to make the whole package and they will come if it's also very beautiful. Then we go back to Square in Siena and take this list with us, and we go in there, and do we come out with 12 little meek? Yeah. No. Going in a place like this, when you come out and say, wow, yeah, indeed, how genius, how wonderful. And when you come to the aesthetic quality and the architect and the design, you said, marvelous. And when you can come up with 12 loud yeses, you have the most beautiful square and most famous square in the world. So seldom this happens. And you may ask, is it possible to make spaces where all these concerns are overlooked? Yes, it is. I found in Copenhagen, in a new town, a square where out of 12 concerns, they overlooked 13. And what happens in such a space? There's a lot of people coming there because there are some important functions, and everybody run as fast as they can to get out of the space. The average time of being there is 42 seconds. That's 42 flat. That's the time to run from metro to shopping center. We found another square with the same number of people in Norway, where most all of the 12 quality criteria was observed, and throughout they had 10 times more people. People even come from all over the city to visit there. In the other place, they came there to run out as fast as they could. So there is about a factor of 10 times more people and more life if you do it right as compared to not doing it right. And as people like life and other people, it's worth thinking about this tenfold opportunity we have. So, in conclusion, planning is very important, but really the battle is lost or won in the people scale in eye level. This means break. This means water. But also I'm going to treat some other subject now. While all this research was going on, of course, in these 50 years, there have been a number of developments. And previously, we had that modernism and motorism were the order of the day. Now we have got a new planning paradigm. I think it changed, really changed around year 2000 when we really started to feel the tailwind for the humanistic city planning, which we have been advocating or interested in. Today, most mayors today, if you say, would you like a lively and livable city, they'll say, yeah, that's it. That's our program. And this has to do with that modern man, yeah, he was running, but people always like to meet other people. They always like to use public spaces. They always had other people and watching other people and meeting other people as very high in the agenda. Actually, people is the greatest attraction in any city, and opportunities to see life and activity is the greatest attraction of all, and it still is. People would say that with iPhones and tablets, you don't have to care about public space. That is absolutely not the case. In the time when all these electronics have been developed, we have seen that more and more public spaces have always been developed and people are streaming to use them. Also, we have twice as much free, leisure time as before, and we have easily time enough to enjoy other people in the city and to watch our iPhone or upgrade our Facebook, whatever. So looking at girls or looking at other people always was a major social activity. It still is. I thought that when you get older, it would not be so interesting. It's not so. You still watch what is beautiful and do it very intensively, maybe even more so as years go by. But nice things are nice things, and the biggest interest are other people. Also, we have now a strong commitment to do something about sustainability, the climate challenge. And of course, the more we walk and bike for mobility, that's very good for climate. And as we gradually are to get rid of the cars, we will see a great upsurge of public transportation, and good public realm and good public transportation, they're brothers and sisters, because you have to get there to have this connection between the two systems. Then we have had a new, very serious challenge. That is the sitting syndrome. And the doctors tell us increasingly with horror in their eyes that for 50 years we made city planning which invited people increasingly to sit, and never use their own muscles and never move enough. We've heard now from the doctors that every one of us need 1 hour of moderate exercise, walking for an hour, bicycling for an hour, and we'll have 7 more years to look forward to, and these years would be of a much better quality of life, with much less doctor and hospital and pills. Quality of life would be much better, and there'll be 7 years. And if we take 1 hour a day, that's only 2 years, and you get 7 years, so there's a benefit of 5 years here. And also, it's much, much cheaper for the hospital, for the health system, if we move naturally. That is why the World Health Organization today said very sternly, you must make whatever you do, your urban planning, so that people naturally in the course of their daily doings do as much walking and bicycling as possible. This is a new, very serious challenge. My daughter is a doctor in cancer, and she is deeply involved in finding out that if you don't move enough, you're more likely to have cancer, and it will develop faster, all this stuff. Also, there's new evidence showing that people in suburbs live shorter than people in cities, and that's been done worldwide. Why? Because in the cities you walk more and there are more stairs. In the suburbs you drive more and sit more. And in the long run, you have 2 different health profiles in these 2 settings. So we have to make cities which are inviting people to use their own muscles as much as possible. Also, other new challenges is that we have increasingly an elderly population. In most of the Western cities, maybe it's 20 to 25% already who are retired and who have been ordered by their doctor to walk 10,000 steps a day. And how many places can you do that in comfort and enjoyment? We have that challenge. We have new challenges. And if we look carefully at these challenges, if we are sweet to the people walking, to public life, and to bicycling, we actually address all these issues in a very cheap and very simple way. And then we are back to the good old days again, because these cities, they could really accommodate these kind of activities. They were made for them. So we can ask the questions, are there cities today who have firmly this policy that in this city we do everything to invite you to walk and bike as much as possible? Yes, there are. And there are more and more of them all around the world. In our company, we have been out there in 18 years, and we have worked on more than 2,000 cities all over the world, showing, and all of that with this agenda to make the people, the walking and the bicycling, more accessible, better conditions. And it's so interesting that there's such a great urge around the world for something which are different from the modernistic and the motoristic city. That's what I learned from this map. There's only one little problem up there, that's Reykjavik. They went broke in the process, but all the other ones are doing fine. Now, for the next 2 hours, I will go through all the cities and show you what they have done. No, I have been forced by the time limit to cut most of it. You'll just have some keywords. One of the cities who have done best in the world, it's by far the best city in the Southern Hemisphere. They work since 1985, very, very pointed towards being good for people, being good for walking, being good for bicycling. That's Melbourne. They also have done a lot of things of bringing 10,000s of new residents into the city center. And Melbourne now is a fantastic city. Go there. And the atmosphere is just like in Paris, but the weather is much better. And So if you don't know what to do, move to Melbourne. I could give you a long story about our work in Sydney. I can just say that it's been going on for 10 years now. It's been a bloody hard work to push the buses out of the streets and the cars, but now they are full speed putting in light rail and pedestrian streets and bike lanes. Good for Sydney. I could tell you a lot about New York. I will not do that. But who is this? This is Jeanette Sadiq-Khan and Amanda Burden coming to Copenhagen 2 weeks after Jeanette was commissioned as commissioner in New York. They popped up in Copenhagen and say, hey, show us what a good city should look like. They grabbed some bicycles and they were there for 48 hours. And we couldn't get the bicycles away from them. They took it in bed and everything. And in the airport, we managed to get our bikes back. And they said, we want a city like this one. When can you come? And I was quick. I said, we can come on Monday. Because we knew that Michael Bloomberg was in a hurry to do something. That was the beginning of a long collaboration where these guys, they got inspiration from many places. It was a great, great inspiration to have been part of this transformation with all the bicycle lanes in New York and the transformation of squares. This is Times Square early in 2009 and later in 2009. And we all know that now they've made 50 of these squares and New York has changed quite a bit. I was telling in a conference about these cities we work with, and then this little stout guy came galloping up to me and said, hey, I'm the deputy mayor of Moscow. Can you come and humanize Moscow? We are in a hurry. You can have 12 months. When can you come? On Monday. Then I went to Moscow with our team, and we were completely shocked. I've never seen a city so inundated by cars and where the cars had such a jolly good time. It appeared there were no parking rules. It was rumored that people didn't like parking rules, and I was not surprised. But I said, you have to have parking rules or you can never have anything like a decent city. And that was one of the one-way streets here. This is a little neighborhood street. Then they were this is Main Street, Moscow. Of course, they had not enough parking spaces, so they had taken in 2/3 of the sidewalk of Main Street, Moscow, to have more parking. There were 1 meter left for the Moscovites to walk up and down Main Street, Moscow, a city of 15 million people, 1 meter. It was not impressive. And the mayor said at once, how many books have you written? Yeah. I'll publish them all. So in 3 months, they published 3 of my books. They're published by City of Moscow. They're publishing here. The worried guy is the Danish ambassador in the corner there. And then we were commissioned to study the street life in the city of Moscow, central parts, and was very quickly done because there was hardly anything left. We also had this idea that maybe freedom from communism was a right to park everywhere. And we had some discussion with the mayor, and they realized a lot of things, and then started a fantastic turnaround. I'll show you some pictures of that very fast. This is Main Street, Moscow, when we started. This is 2 years later. A gray street has become green. All the cars have disappeared. Instead, there are benches. All the advertisements has disappeared. And instead, you have a free view to Kremlin. This is another street, 211, and this is the same street 2 years later. This is a corner of Pushkin Square, a major part major square in New York in 2011. This is the same place in 2017. We talked a lot about the riverfronts. We said that in New York they have Hudson River, and in New York they have Thames. In London they have Seine. In Paris, and all the cities have waterfronts, and nearly all of them have cultivated the waterfront for using by the leisure time society to have a good time at the waterfront. In Moscow, all of them were used for cars. But then, of course, you come back 2, 3, 4 years later, and it starts to look like this. This is, I was there in August, and it was fantastic to see what a phenomenal change had been happening in Moscow. And then they started to say, we have a baby boom here now, Jan, and it's your fault because of all the cars you took away from the boulevards and all the cars you took away from the parks and all the bloody benches. And you've even put up swings so that people can swing in Moscow. So there's a price to be paid, but I'm happy for this connection. So watch out for humanistic city planning. You may have a baby boom. I also found in Moscow a sculpture of Le Corbusier. And I had the opportunity to go and tell him where he was wrong. And he didn't answer me. That was a very lucky, good occasion. One city, I will end with this city, because this is a city by far which was one of the very first who started out of humanizing the city, of celebrating the people walking and biking. That is my hometown of Copenhagen, and they have been on such policies now for 56 years, and they started bloody early in 1962. That was exactly the same time as Jan Gehl was writing over in New York. These guys, they didn't know anything about Moses and Jan Gehl. They just thought that there was not room for all these cars in the city center, so they took them out. And it was very generally agreed that we were Danes, we were not Italians, it will never work in Denmark, it was too cold, and people were too obsessed with driving in cars. You could never make public spaces and pedestrian spaces in the state of Denmark, and they did anyway, and it was enormous success. And then we started a long period of being Italians. And this is how the situation was in 2062 when they started this. It was not the first in the world or in Europe. In Germany, they had a number of pedestrian streets before that made in connection with the rebuilding after the war. But this was a major pioneering thing anyway, the main street, 1 kilometer long. And the thing here is, it's not 2 blocks, which is the concept of a shopping center in the city center. It is the whole street, 1 kilometer, so now you can walk through the whole street. It was a promenade, it's a walkway, it's an invitation to walk in the city and not something about blocking 2 blocks so you can have a shopping mall in the city center. Many people ask me why doesn't it work many times in America. That's why. It's not a system, it's a little shopping center there. This is how the same area is today, and just to see the difference over these 50 years, they have really worked. Every year they've done something, and the city now is very much dominated by people and public life. I just show you, it looked like this in the 50s when I was a student. Now all the squares are people squares. All the canal sides look like this, and all the canal sides now look like this. The streets have been changed, whatever. And what is maybe the most interesting is Copenhagen. Not only were we the first city in the world where the life of the city was systematically studied by us people at the School of Architecture. We did it since the 60s, and they always have perfect documentation about how the pro-people interventions, how they worked. But also in 2009, they made a strategy, and I really recommend strategies for everyone. Don't focus on projects, focus on strategies. Where would you want this city to be 5, 10, 20 years from now? Describe it, and then describe the stages, and then set forth to be there in 10, 20 years. In Copenhagen, they made this, we will be the best city for people in the world. And they say, come out of your private entity, come out of your private flats and houses, come out and join the other people of this city in our streets, squares, and parks, which we have made very comfortable and very interesting. And if we do it because we want more livability, better sustainability, that you help your health by coming out, but it's also when you meet your fellow citizens, it's better for social seclusion, better for safety, feeling of safety, and in the end, it's good for democracy that the citizens love to come out and meet each other. That was their strategy, and I did bring one for the mayor of Savannah, and the similar one for bicycling will be the best for bicycling in the world. And what has happened in Copenhagen in these years is we have a fantastic public life depending on, or considering that we are so far to the north and we are not so many and whatever, it's a very, very lively city because they've invited systematically people for 50 years. If you invite cars, you get more traffic. If you invite people, you get more people, even if it's a little bit cold. I could tell you much about the bicycling, I will not, but just tell you that parallel with this, they've had this policy to invite people to bicycle. They made a citywide bicycle lane network with curbs, both to the cars and to the sidewalk. It's for all generations, and it's now such a safe system. When kids are 5 years, they can travel all over the city with their parents. When my grandchildren are 12 years, they are allowed to bicycle from one end of the city to the other because it's safe to bicycle. So the teenagers have become mobile that way. And they put out all kinds of shortcuts and bridges over the harbor so that it's always easier to take your bike than to take your car. And they've done a number of nice little things. This is a waste paper basket for bicyclists where they can just, as they go, many, many nice little concerns like this. And the result is a fantastic bicycle culture, 41% of everyone every day coming to work in Copenhagen on their bike. And talking about bicycle culture, little story here. My wife and I, many years ago, we had 45th year anniversary, and it was a summer day, and we took the bikes, and we were about 70, both of us at that time, and we started from home, and we biked on good bicycle lanes, side by side, in comfort and safety all the way around in the city center. We had to find a place to have a dinner, over to the harbor and back again, found a place. And you can see that after we had the dinner, it's a little wavery because when you had dinner on bicycle, you can have an extra glass. And then when we came home, we sat down and saw, gee, that's amazing. 2 70-year-old people can do 19.8 kilometers on bicycle side by side in safety and comfort. What a lovely city we have. And then we realized that in all the 45 years we have been married, now it's about 55. But in all these years, every day when we woke up, we were quite sure that the city had become a little bit better than it was yesterday. And that's a wonderful feeling to have for somebody who have children and grandchildren, to realize that the city becomes better and better day for day for a long, long period. Copenhagen has that quality and is one of the nicest cities, most humane cities in the world today. And we put this down on a map of New York, and you start in Central Park, and you go to Battery Park, you go over to Newark, and you go back and have dinner in Meatpacking District, you go back to Central Park, 20 kilometers. Could not do that there. So we could end here, we will not. We will end here by rejoicing, wow, it's a wonderful 21st century. But there's an extra little chapter here. Because I mentioned what we can do is we can clean up after the cars in existing cities where they have the spaces. But I think that we are not very good in making new towns and new construction. So I'll ask, we know a lot of things, and this knowledge of Jane Jacobs and maybe our studies, they are used extensively in all the existing cities. But when we turn our eyes to the things which are being made on the virgin land around the cities and the new towns and whatever, these things are not used. They are still on the old paradigms. All my books have come out in China, and I'm very proud about that. What I'm not so proud about and happy about is that they've not had time to read them over there. But maybe given more time, they will have time. But still, you can see a lot of construction being done in the way I was taught 50 years ago in School of Architecture, standing over the models and plonking down the various stuff. You can see places like Dubai, where are they using this kind of knowledge? No, they are not. They are putting in a lot of high-rise, and we still have what I call the bird shit architects flying around and dropping towers for whoever will pay for a tower, they can get a tower. And to me, Dubai is not a city, it's a collection of perfume bottles, each made to look different from the other one, but perfume bottles doesn't make a city. I could go around and be depressed like in the Moscow suburbs. Is this what we can do for mankind in 2018? Wonder. This is a new town in Belgrade in Serbia on the Danube riverbank. Is this what we can do for mankind in 2018? This is a Danish new town. It's actually rush hour. There are 2 people here and too much space. And is this what we can really do? I'll invite you at the very end, and soon we are over. I'll invite you to a few projects which I think are doing good. One is this project in Sweden, in the harbor of Malmö, BO01. And if I want a place where these humanistic principles are really used, BO01 is one of the best. It's made by Claes Tam, who made the master planning, and he's not a Mr. Nobody, because he came from a firm called the Erskine Architects. And if we go a little bit further back in history, we can find that one of the finest architects in the 20th century, Ralph Erskine, he was the one who was able to make projects which look wonderful from an aeroplane, wonderful from a helicopter, but especially they were fantastic at eye level. He had this feeling for people. He had a heart as big as a DeSoto or car, and he had this feeling for people, and he told me a lot about good architecture. He said, this is British social housing, cost nothing. He said, if it has to be cheap, then make a very cheap barrack and add the architecture on the outside. That's much cheaper, and make sure it looks very rich and wonderful at eye level, because that's where you pick up if it's a wonderful area, and that's where people can unfold. So there will be little benches by all the doors and little screens and little awnings, and there will be little gardens, and it's so carefully worked out at eye level and always in Ralph Erskine's projects. That is where Claes Tam was working with Erskine all the years, and then later on he did BO01. Some of the things about BO01 is they never allowed any developer to have more than one small block. So a developer could have 12 blocks, but they would be scattered all over. And they did, it was diverse, it was sustainable, they did all the good things you can think about, and they pushed the building so that the spaces became really interesting. They did a lot for walking and a lot for bicycling. They're close to the center of Malmö. It's really a part of Malmö now, an extremely popular part. And they have this fine green network and these fine pedestrian walkways throughout the site. If we take my little list and go to this place, we come out with 12 roaring, yeah. And that's why 3 of my people in my office are living there. And many other people love to live there. I shall end, and now you are happy to hear that, by inviting you to this little area in Copenhagen. It's called the Potato Rows. It's some British-inspired workers' row houses from year 1900. It's 120 years ago. And what is famous about this, what's interesting about it is completely uninteresting from the aeroplane. You can go over it and say, oh dear. And you can go over it in a helicopter and say, oh, how boring. But down where people are, they have all the qualities you can ask for. And these people are sitting there having such a good time with each other and their neighbors and the kids. They have not time to think about, our area looks awful from the air. Or from the rooftop height, because we have a nice time here. So, and if you take this list of qualities, you can find that down in these streets, they have all the qualities you can ask for. And now comes the interesting little extra thing. That is, this area has some of the highest real estate price values in Copenhagen, though it's 120 years old. And the more interesting thing, this area has the highest proportion of architects' families in the nation of Denmark. Half of all the professors of School of Architecture, they live here while they do the other stuff, whatever they do. Architects know what is good for architects' families. So, what about, sometimes people ask me, what about the future? And I could elaborate that. We will not, and we have to go home at some point. When people ask me what to do in the future, I say, oh, no, it's not going to be Dubai, not at all. It's completely unsustainable. It's motorism and modernism, and they cook all the water they water the golf course with. It's not at all humanistic city planning. And even worse, this is a vision from Ford about the future. To make safe, they say, decades and decades from now, our cities may look like that with automatic cars. I'm so happy I'm old when I see such a prediction. The only thing which will be, who will be really happy about the automatic cars is the automobile industry. But many of the visions they have, they are completely awful, and we have to fight it with all our might and realize that with more vehicles will not be, with twice as many vehicles will not be twice as happy, will be twice as crazy. So what should we do? Yeah, I really believe, after all my years of work, that we should concentrate not on mobility, but on neighborhoods, making good neighborhoods where you can grow up, be adult, and get old. But we need to have no bridges like in Venice, so we can get around with wheelchairs and with bicycles. So Venice, walkable with bicycles, and emphasis on neighborhoods, and underneath a fantastic public transportation system where you can bring your bicycles and move from one neighborhood to the other. And with this, I will end by saying that we have had all the time through all these elaborations the same client, the little walking animal, walking creature who have these abilities. And I will end with a quote from my very special friend and mentor, Ralph Erskine. When he was very old, we did an interview with him, and he was asked, Ralph, what does it take to make a good architect? And he said, to make a good architect, that's very simple. To be a good architect, you must love people, because what we are doing are making the framework of people's life. And if you don't love people, you can never be a good architect. That is also the last word in this book, and I mean it very much myself. Thank you.
CNU presents the Athena Medal to honor our most influential predecessors, those who have cast a lasting and enduring influence on the practice and thought of the new urbanism. Named after the goddess, defender of the city, and weaver of fabric, the Athena Awards recognize the pioneers who laid the groundwork for our movement. Among those, Jan Gehl is one of the very few whose approach gives priority to the human in the design of the physical. His contribution in this regard is acknowledged the world over as the most thorough and the most intelligible, and we might add, the most graceful. We thank you for this, Jan. Please accept the Athena Medal from your admiring colleagues at the Congress. In recognition of the lifetime of work dedicated to building and advocating the places for people, CNU awards Jan Gehl the Athena Award.